Hey guys, Tiago with Classical Technology here. Today I'm going to take you through my Cooler Master H500M build, which is a very high airflow case. So check out some of the footage and I'm going to go over each part and how it was like to build in this case. In terms of the liquid cooling support, I was pretty happy with the case. In the front, I was able to fit a pretty thick Corsair, a 360 millimeter radiator, and then I was also able to put another 360 on top, a little bit thinner, or else it starts to go into the motherboard area a little bit too much. It has a pretty decent space for a D5 pump, which is also a Corsair pump. And I'm also using the Hydro X GPU block and then the CPU block as well from Corsair. So far, I'm still testing them thermally. They seem to maybe be, very close to all of the other, well-known brands like EK on the market. I need a little more time testing with them to see, because right now I'm mostly concerned about the functionality and the aesthetics of the case. Vertically, they look really nice. The Corsair ecosystem is very impressive. It's a little bit of a wiring, to get through when you're building the case. But after everything's in and neatly tucked away with zip ties, the overall effect is really nice, and it's one of the nicest, rainbow unicorn puke effects that you can get. And of course, you can always set it to just one color, like a blue or green or whatever will fit your theme. I find myself in most builds, I'll set it to one color, but for some reason, this particular build with all the Corsair components, in this case, it just looks great with the rainbow, just the different colors splattering. It's such a rich, vibrant color that it's one of the few times that I've built a case and I've left it on that rainbow mode, especially with those 200 millimeter fans on the front. It really adds to that sort of really colorful, almost like a little party feel inside the case, which I usually also prefer one color, but for some reason this one really looks nice. I'm also pretty happy with the other hardware choices that I made. I have an X570 Gigabyte Master motherboard, that's AMD running the 3800X. I kept this one at stock settings because, as you know, in terms of overclocking, these Ryzen 3000 CPUs, they already come from the factory pretty close to the limit. You can definitely push it a little more, but it may not be entirely worth it. It's a lot smaller gains. The graphics card is a 2080 Super, which is one of the newer Nvidia cards, kind of slots in between the previous 2080 and the 2080 Ti. Generally, there are some cards that are a better performance value, but if you look at the price that it's at, it replaced the 2080. I think it's a pretty fair deal considering it has better performance. So it's not exactly a 2080 Ti, but it gets you a little bit closer there. And I think, it kind of slotted in quietly when Nvidia released it, but I think it definitely makes some sense in the market. And the one that I put the block on is the Nvidia Founders Edition, which it's also always a little painful to take away that beautiful Founders Edition cooler with such its rigid, nice build quality. But the temperatures are usually just not very good. Stock you'll get in the 70s Celsius, while you water cool it, you'll be down in the low 40s, even at 100%. So it's definitely worth it to water cool it and do that. The component I was pretty happy with, it's actually the power supply. It's the Asus Thor 850 watt power supply. It's actually a rebranded power supply, but recently Asus has gotten into that power supply RGB game. It has a little OLED screen on the side, which in this particular case, with the little opening on the bottom, you can see it. It's not particularly useful all of the time. You get to see the wattage you're pushing, but it is pretty cool if you can see it. And it does come with pretty decent cables. It's not that a lot of power supplies come with just the basic cables, and I always end up getting cable mod custom cables anyway. With this one, it might actually even be cable mod cables. It seems like one of their simpler styles, but it's a lot nicer than you would typically get with the the thick sort of cabling that's very unattractive that you'll get with a lot of even high-end power supplies. That's why companies like CableMod are so popular, and they can take advantage of that and make cables that are so beautiful, which I generally put them in every build. This one I kind of kept it blacked out just because the cables are pretty nice, and you really don't see it too much with the the GPU situated the way that it does. A little bit about the cable management in this case. The back isn't too bad. It's definitely a little bit tight. I like to put a Aqua Computers software component in there to control the fans and the pump. I do that basically on every build just because it's a lot better with water cooling. You can put a temperature probe in there. In the case of this particular build with the Corsair D5 pump, the pump actually includes a temperature sensor already. So that's great. I'm using the Quadro unit from Aqua Computer, which is like a mini version of their Aqua Aero, if you guys have ever seen that, with the screen, which is generally more expensive, maybe $150, $160 on Amazon, while the Quadro generally you can get for around $59, from Performance PCs or even Amazon itself. They have it, a couple of sellers. It's a very small unit, powered by Molex, which is the only thing that's not too great sometimes, to really fit it in there. It's a little bit awkward, but it has 4 different fan headers on it. You can put a D5 pump on one, make it a fan curve. You can make it a 2 set point controller. It's something that's been used for numerous years, and maybe in the future I'll do a little build on it just to show, especially the Quadro, which I don't think really has been shown enough yet on the market since it's fairly new. The Aqua Aero, you can go back and find videos 5-6 years ago, or and you'll see a lot of videos talking about it and fan curves. But the Quadro, it connects into the same software. It's a little more limited, but it does the basics very, very well. You can connect a flow sensor to it, which I have in my other build. I don't have it in this one because it's just a single loop. And the only flow indicator I really have is on the Corsair GPU, which you can see the little thing spinning. It's much nicer to get a numerical value. It's not just for having it. Sometimes it can indicate a problem. In my other build, the flow sensor was able to tell me that something was really wrong because the flow that I was getting from the D5 pump, the liters per hour, was considerably lower than it should be. So lo and behold, I took the loop apart, I fixed an issue, and the flow came back to normal. So it can actually be a great diagnostic tool, which you can also connect to the Quadro, aside from the regular temperature monitoring, and you can even connect RGB support if you don't want to use Corsair. They have a little, it's called a Splitty 4 RGBX. You can connect that to the Quadro, but that's something for another video. That gets pretty complicated. But after you get the hang of it, I use it in every build. I really enjoy that granular control over the computer. One of the other things I've been really focused on water cooling builds has been to find that perfect balance of performance thermally and in terms of the GPU boost clocks, as well as silence. A lot of times people think more radiators don't make a difference, but if you add enough radiators, you can really run those fans at lower RPMs where you can't really hear them. Even the D5 pump, you can put that on a curve. So one of the most satisfying things you can do is be running a game or a benchmark at full tilt, and then you can't even really hear your computer unless you get close to it. So that's definitely a very nice goal. And this is something that this case particularly is good at because it's so open with the airflow. You could definitely get a lot of fresh air in, and that way everything stays a little bit cooler rather than if everything was closed off by tempered glass panels like it used to be in the front. So that's one of the key points of water cooling. Sometimes people think it's just for aesthetics, and while of course it improves aesthetics tremendously, it also really gives you a nice performance boost. In a lot of cases, you can have higher GPU boost clocks, you can overclock your CPU higher, and you can game knowing that you can run everything at a lower volume with a lot of granular control, especially with the Aqua Computer software that I mentioned previously.